Hello, everyone, and welcome to a truly special episode of the AEC AI and Tech Strategy Podcast, our 100th episode. I'm your host, Nick Heim, and today we are celebrating 100 conversations that have shaped the future of the industry. When we started this show, our goal was simple: to explore how artificial intelligence, data, and technology are transforming the way we plan, design, and build. But what it's become is so much more: a community of innovators, leaders, and learners who are passionate about pushing the boundaries of what's possible in AEC. From exploring how digital twins are changing infrastructure management to uncovering how AI is influencing structural design, we featured experts who are helping us all navigate this fast-moving, tech-driven world. And in this milestone episode, we're taking a look back at the top 10 episodes that captured your attention the most, the ones that sparked ideas, inspired innovation, and showed just how powerful technology can be when it's used with purpose. So, whether you've been with us since episode 1 or you're just tuning in for the first time, thank you for being part of this journey. Here's to the incredible guests, the groundbreaking insights, and the next 100 episodes still to come. But before we jump in, I want to tell you about AEC PM Connect, where AEC professionals explore how technology and innovation can transform project management, performance, and leadership. And here's the exciting part. This event will also be announcing the winners of the AEC PM Awards, recognizing professionals who lead with purpose and deliver measurable results. Just imagine someone from your firm being named the AEC PM of the Year. That kind of recognition can boost your people, your culture, and your firm's reputation in a big way. The event will take place on June 10th, 2026 at the Forest Gate Country Club in New Jersey. You can register now at aecpmconnect.com. And if you want to nominate someone for the awards, head over to aecpmawards.com to download the nominations guide before the deadline on February 28th, and I hope to see you in New Jersey in June. With that, let's jump into today's episode. Okay, starting at number 10, we have episode 77 with Dr. Jagwaya, Senior Vice President and Managing Director at WSP in the U.S., who spoke about how AI is shaping the future of BIM and what effect it will have on project workflows and efficiency. Let's hear what he had to say.
So I think if you just go back to the core of what BIM, let's say BIM conveys, as opposed to a drawing, the intent is data, right? The underpinning is information that is more than just a drawing. Drawings, certainly are also geometric information, but we're talking about non-alphanumeric information that comes in addition with that, right? So data is a core component of what you're trying to communicate, so people can use geometry and data together to understand intent. What is AI's foundation? There are three things that are foundational to AI: is high quality data, technology, certainly, the use of technology, and then the use of, the confluence of those two, brought together in ways to actually enable analytics, right? So that AI is dependent on data as a principle. So when BIM models and BIM data models are rich in data, AI is simply going to make use of that information to automate more and more things, as long as your data is reliable, right? So I just see the future. To me, AI application in BIM, and it's already happening, is simply either the next step. It is simply the next logical step. How AI will leverage BIM, is simply where the industry will logically evolve to. We don't even need to try to do that. As long as your models are good, AI has the potential to accelerate the value of them in many, many profound ways. And we are seeing that already, Nick. And for example, automating clash detections, generating design alternatives, predicting, future scheduling needs or maybe cost needs on a project basis, optimizing sequencing of construction as a result of those. AI does transform, data-rich models into decision-ready, insights, right? So I think BIM is a data-rich model, and we are simply taking it to the next level. And for example, WSP, in a typical project, there is a day shift where we're actually in the construction and we're building things, and the night shift is in-office work that's looking at what's happening in the field, resolving conflicts, checking information, making sure that the model is up to date and ready to go the next day. We have a tool in-house, and we have appropriately called it night shift, right? So I think basically the night shift tool is nothing but the use of AI to essentially automate a lot of our tasks that enhance model quality, right? It boosts our productivity. It improves, it actually reduces risk, and it basically helps us our engineers have a better quality of life, as some of our night shift creators have told us. Essentially they automate all the routine tasks that are done with a lot of manual intervention, and AI helps us. Agentic AI especially helps us automate many of those tasks. And Night Shift is our in-house developed automation platform engineered to handle large-scale models, to essentially do the mundane tasks of checking, drawings and models overnight in the background, using AI. And we are doing that mainly because we feel like, it definitely helps us intelligently prioritize and optimize our workflows and frees up our teams to focus on high value and creative tasks during the day. So, I'm sure there is a lot of innovation happening around the world using AI, but I think it's, AI and BIM are made for each other.
And one, just very simple task that, I think could be very appropriate to this discussion is, for example, if you're nearing the end of the day shift and you're gearing up for another pour and you have, reinforcement placement on a deck, for example. In high-rise construction, this technology is out there. I'm sure there's something similar in the bridge world, but there are artificial intelligence systems that look for clashes and conflicts, right? Do you have your sleeves in the correct places? Is the bar placement correct? Maybe a little bit tougher on that last one, but the idea is, that rapid determination of data and information guided by experienced humans, of course, I think really has a lot of promise in this type of application.
And we have, like I said, our tool, our Night Shift tool, for example, also does, I think you're 100% right in terms of clash detection, but we also automate several repetitive processes, Nick. For example, drawing audits, CAD standards compliance checks, BIM standards compliance checks in the future, data extraction, batch plotting, optimizations, generative designs, and things of that nature. And this is done thousands of files, right, per run. And I think what we are seeing is a result of AI combined with high quality, AI checks, and agentic AI combined with BIM or even CAD standards, reduces our production time by 50 to 80%. This is manual stuff, right? And, that we used to do, but it does free up our engineers. In fact, I think as somebody said, one of our developers on this, the core developer said, it's not just about productivity. It's about the quality of life for our engineers who are trained, for something else, bigger tasks than just, the routine task that computer can handle. So I think, again, I can't say this enough that, BIM is meant to give us data-rich models, and AI is meant to work on those data-rich models, high quality. I have to say that is important, that we have good quality data in the BIM models, as long as you're assured of that. Or even if you don't have it, you have standards that you can check against and do like things like you said, like clash detection, but many other mundane tasks as well. So I think we are seeing great value as AEC, in this.
And Jag, on the O&M side, I'm very excited as for the proliferation of computer vision models, because I don't think anyone likes counting cracks and spalls, and that's right. It's just same idea, repetitive tasks, just in the field instead of the office. So we're very excited for what the future holds.
Change detection, and automatic work ordering, and we are seeing all of that as well. On the LiDAR side, we have use machine language and AI models. I think I couldn't agree more with you. I think on all sides, I think AI is here to stay, and it is here to help us make better decisions. I'd rather spend my time, as you said, instead of counting cracks, understanding what's changing and what type of crack pattern it is, and then tying it back to understanding the cause and effect, so I can better engineer my materials and designs so that we can prevent this in the future.
Number 9, episode 59 with Chad Daniel, Vice President and Nexus Sales Manager at Stanley Consultants, who talked about the role of data centers in driving energy innovation. Here's his thoughts on whether or not renewable energy will eventually be able to fully meet the energy demands of data centers.
The projections are that data centers currently take up about 4% of the United States electrical demand at this point, and that is anticipated to increase to at least 9% by 2030s. So it's really a doubling of all the demand out there, which is a substantial amount of energy to start, and doubling that over the course of less than half a decade or just over half a decade is really a challenge. Not only siting and getting them built, but dealing with supply chain constraints, permitting requirements, and all the other things that go along with it.
Right, which I'm sure all of those factors contribute to those numbers. Right, you said 2 to 3 years to actually build a data center, but 7 years to essentially build the infrastructure to power it.
Yeah, yes. And that's why you're seeing some delays on, retiring coal plants. Utilities are on a push to reduce their carbon footprint. They've been doing a great job of it. But some of these assets are going to have to stay in play just to maintain the electric grid over the course of the next, 5-10 years. And then you're also seeing in the news quite a bit, a lot of interest in reviving or, lining up agreements with nuclear plants that have been marginal in the electric space for the last 5 or 10 years, and bring them online to just power data centers. And there's a lot of that activity going on, either with ones that were currently running and very, marginally profitable, to ones that they're taking out of mothball status and seeing if it's feasible to bring them back online to be able to meet some of the demand out there.
In 8th place, we asked Peter Nabhan, Senior National Practice Leader at the ECS Group of Companies, how AEC leaders can successfully guide their teams through innovation and transformation while using AI to drive sustainable change. Let's hear his thoughts on creating a culture that empowers people and technology to work together.
I think to be able to answer that question, I did some research on, large companies or tech companies that have been very successful at technology adoption. And the one common denominator in every single one of these was it was all about the culture. Culture trumps everything else. So innovation, transformation, it doesn't happen in the C-suite. It happens at the front lines. It's a grassroots movement. So if you, at the C-suite, your job or, executive leadership, any type of leadership role, your job is to make sure your culture or your workforce is empowered, they're problem solving, and they feel like they can bring new ideas throughout the organization. And once you have that in your DNA as an organization, it stops becoming a friction point. It's not like you're pushing. I've heard people say, throughout my life, oh, this corporate's pushing this down on us. You never want to be in that position. You want to push, something upwards. And that's how you become successful. And that's how habits are created in an organization where people buy into these habits. They feel like they have more agency of their time. That's how I felt when I started using AI tools. I also was a non-believer at the beginning. And then I realized I've got so much more time. I know we talked about, I showed you this earlier. So, this is where your innovators are. It's only 2.5%, and then your early adopters. But most people exist within the other half. They don't want to take on too much risk, and they're leery, especially our industry. We move slow. And that's a good thing, because we're as old as humanity. We built the pyramids back in the day. We built the Great Wall of China. We'll probably build the futuristic city on Mars. Sorry, we built the futuristic city on Mars. In March, maybe. But
hey, it's a 1 out of 12 chance.
Exactly. So that's what people don't understand, is because we're such a mature industry that things move slower, and that's okay. But to get the buy-in of the people that are not necessarily your innovators or your early adopters, it's going to happen by enabling them and giving them that agency over their life.
Absolutely. And I can speak to this from my own experience, right, Peter? I would say we're both squarely in that, first 2.5%, and then the second category, right, innovators, and then, so that would put us in either innovators or early adopters. But the truth is, it's just like most people, like you said, are going to fall. I'd even say, into the back half of the curve, the late majority and the laggards, which is fine, because if you have a company that's full of the 2.5%, right, you're never going to get anything done.
Oh, absolutely. You're always innovating.
And part of the message that I heard, but don't think was said explicitly, is if your company is set up in a manner that is completely top down, like, you will struggle with grassroots initiatives. And I think you don't have to change anything. I think it's just good for firms of that structure to understand, like, the consequences of that decision. Exactly. Because if in fact innovation is part bottom up with executive approval and buy-in, but you're not allowing that grassroots movement to come to life, you will struggle. And I have seen that firsthand. At number 7, Stanley Stoll, CEO and principal engineer at Knott Laboratory, shared his perspective on how new technologies and evolving standards are revolutionizing building assessments and structural forensics. Here's what he had to say about the innovations improving building safety and resilience.
Well, I think there's two sides to that equation. I think there's the technology side, and I think there's also the industry as a whole, trying to push forward. We've had some recent incidents that, some fatalities, some big collapses and things like that. And that's changing the conversation for structural engineers across the nation. It's, consumers are starting to ask questions. They're starting to want to evaluate their buildings and so forth. So there's that side of things. There's also so on the technology side of things, we just have the ability to start to look at buildings more thoroughly, trying to do more with non-destructive, not opening up systems, but trying to see things. And some of the biggest things, every structural engineer knows that 95% or 98% of our problems result from water infiltration and getting into something that we don't want it in, causing degradation of the materials that we once thought were structurally competent and were designed. Well, now you got degradation of concrete. Nick, you like parking structures? Like, that's your number one problem probably. And it's the same thing for exterior balconies. Surfside had a component of degradation of concrete with the salts and the water and things like that down there. Still waiting on that final report. But anyhow, just understanding where that is occurring. So a couple of tools that come into that. One is the, thermal cameras. So using thermal cameras on the ground, using them from the air on a drone, you can start to try to pick up where you've got moisture intrusion inside of systems. And I'm speaking specifically to, technology that can be used. And then the other one is just deflections or differential movement in the building. Has it settled over here in this side, or, is it settled? Do you have deflection that's showing up in concrete double T's, or, inverted T's, or just in some sort of suspended slab, or the actual foundation is moving? And so, the technology that we're using mostly there is, LiDAR scanners to come in and just pick that up really quickly and see what it looks like, So for us, just to kind of extrapolate upon that, scan it with a scanner, process it, get it into recap, and now turn it into a heat map by elevation view. And you can start to see exactly where this building is high, low, and what's changing. For structural engineers, that's fantastic knowledge, right? Now you have a direction to go look.
And you're essentially taking where our tried and true methods, and let's just say it's a single sensor or a single gauge at one point measuring the movement of a single element over time. Now that's great. I mean, I don't want to be the one sticking a bunch of those all over a building, but the system you've just described gives you a holistic picture of what's happening over time.
Yeah. I've installed a lot of crack gauges over the years and done elevation surveys with, everything from total stations to zip levels. And those are all great components of it. The laser scan component is just taking that to the next level. The big piece that I really like is is now you can start to link multiple floors and get that alignment to, to see what is happening every floor up. Does everything match? And this whole side of the building is dropped down, and so you can see that on every level, or is it different? Because if it's different, it's just gonna open up another kind of world of problems to evaluate and figure out, what is ultimately causing it. So yeah. So anyhow, and then the other component I would say is, this happens in whether it's a residential structure or in, say, a parking structure where you have two different systems. You have a slab on grade at some level, and then you have a structural foundation that's supporting main level and above. Well, what is the slab doing relative to the main level? So when you do a scan, not only did you pick up the elevation of the garage slab or whatever, but you also picked up the elevation of the ceiling of the garage. Residential construction, that ceiling should be pretty flat. The garage should be sloped, right? And taking those two into account, now if that garage is the garage ceiling is sloped, you've got exterior foundation, structural foundation movement, not just slab movement. And so it's just a great way to kind of isolate those two, have way more information than we normally would. A lot of times, sometimes we would take an elevation survey of the ceiling. Not always. Now you've got a complete picture of it just with one scan. So.
And what's great there, Stan, is if you're a practicing engineer and that's something you're interested in, you can be the one to collect the data. But if you prefer to just rely on a specialist to collect it for you and do the analysis of it, that's okay too. But I don't know if that would necessarily be the case if we were relying on more traditional methods, because it would be you or me out there trying to collect that data point by point.
That's correct. Yeah, we've learned the technology. We'd like to at least be able to work with the data. You could have somebody go scan it and collect it, but learn the 3D space. Everybody's working, or not everybody, but a lot of people are working in Revit, right? We've largely made that transition to BIM and 3D modeling. Just go to Recap. It's probably in your Autodesk package that you own. Check it out and start to play with it, because it's very similar to everything that you're already doing in Revit. Just check it out and Recap and start to understand that. And it's a simple tool. It's not super complex.
Coming in at number 6, Dr. Shirley Dyke and Dr. Vedas Hosker discussed how AI can be strategically leveraged to solve productivity challenges in structural engineering. Let's listen to their thoughts on identifying the right problems for AI and how these tools can enhance both safety and performance.
Yeah, the way I look at it, I think there are two types of applications. One is where you are trying to get access to the most relevant piece of information for you to do your job. And so this could be things like searching through a new building code that you need to be looking through to find something that's useful. It could be for a junior engineer trying to understand what a specific requirement is or some concept in engineering. It could be also searching through your own past historical designs to find something that's closest to what you want to do, and then use that in a new design. And so this type of a retrieval problem, I think, is something that AI can be very suited to, because it can allow you to search through a large set of information and identify some things that are most relevant. The other type of application, I think, are those that help with the core aspect of what we're trying to do as structural engineers. And this can also be broad. For example, it can be related to inspections. It can be related to design. But with modern AI systems, the thing that is different from the previous generation of AI systems is that they have a broad understanding of the world. They are able to make decisions, and they're really good at understanding what is inside pieces of data. So, vision language models are very good at understanding images, and they know so much about the world that it's easy to teach them some specifics also about structural engineering, so they can be leveraged to interpret what's inside an image. Similarly, we can also expand these capabilities to interpret what is inside drawings and other sorts of visual information. For design problems, as engineers, we're making a lot of decisions. And, if there are parts of the process where the response of the AI is not going to affect the safety of your final output, then it's okay to use the AI to help come up with suggestions or options that the engineer can then review, applying their full understanding and knowledge about the problem. So even for a design scenario, I think there are going to be opportunities where AI can help come up with different design options that an engineer can then carefully review. And this can help not only increase productivity, but offer new capabilities as engineers explore more of the design space.
It's a really nice summary of Edison. And what I heard was almost like a sliding scale from, well, let's just say maybe how critical a task is, right? Like, so you gave an example of just search and retrieval, right? Like, hey, I know I designed this base plate detail for this client about 3 years ago on this project, and you know it's a good fit for what you're doing now, and you just can't seem to find it. Well, that's a great application for search. You know, you mentioned young engineers and code interpretation, right? Maybe, you know, helping them break down an empirically derived equation to help them better understand where it's coming from, all the way up through perhaps some assistance with critical design decisions. So I like the way you phrased it, because to me, at least, like, those are some pretty clear examples of how the technology can be used to partner with structural engineers and maybe alleviate some of the fears that our peers have, depending on what their exposure to the technology has been.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you summed it up really, really well there.
And I actually, you know, I love these specific use cases, because I think it gets people's minds churning, and it allows them to just think about how to apply what others are doing to their specific scenario. So at number 5, we asked Jesse Light, president of SML, Consulting Structural and Forensic Engineers, how his experience with NCSEA and the NSF Advisor Center is shaping his view on AI's future in structural engineering. Here's how he sees these technologies redefining collaboration and project delivery.
Yeah, it kind of started with a post on Reddit. About 2 years ago, I met a guy through my wife. My wife is the admin director here, and she was on Reddit looking at the structural engineering forum, and this guy was looking for a summer internship. And she said, there's this PhD student at the University of Houston. He says he's in the SAIL laboratory program or something like that, right? And SAIL was the Structural Engineering and Artificial Intelligence Lab out of the University of Houston. I was like really intrigued by that. And he had done some like NASA projects and stuff using satellite imagery and all this. And so it kind of had this conversation with him about becoming a summer intern here. So I offered him probably more than I'd normally offer somebody, just because I was like really fascinated by his experience with NASA. And he did a great job. He did like 3 projects where he created this tool that we could find old projects that we had done. Through the last few years, we had all of the original owners of SML retire. And so they had been these forensics guys, and they did a ton of forensics reports. But because they were all gone, we had no way to access them, really. Like, we didn't know where to look. So he created this tool that took all the Word documents and compressed them into JSON files and vectorized them so that we could then search through them to find stuff using keyword searches. And so we could look that stuff up. So that was one thing he did for us. He did a couple other things. But anyway, later on, he had invited me to the University of Houston to go and try to create a new center for structural engineering and artificial intelligence through the National Science Foundation, NSF. So Visor is the Structural Engineering Artificial Intelligence Center name that they're trying to make. And IUCRC is the name that is given by the National Science Foundation for these centers. So it's like a program. So like the pharmaceutical industry has a program. They have a center. ASU here is like a part of, I think, 6 or 7 different centers, right? Different ones, not the structural engineering one, but different ones. So the University of Houston was teaming up with Purdue University, NSF, and they're trying to get like, I think 6 to 10 different industry leaders to come in and invest in this center. And if we get it opened, then it would pool our resources to create R&D work. Like the universities would do all the R&D work. The university would put in like 200,000. NSF would put in 300,000. All of these companies would put in like 75,000. And you pull your resources, and now all of a sudden you have like $1.3 million invested in the research and development. And at the end of 1 year, you get all of the things that they produce. And because you're on the board, you get to kind of determine what programs they research and develop. So you get to kind of a say on what that outcome is. And so that really helped me. Well, I should say that got me in this door into this area that introduced me to John Michael, and Xing was there also, and he's on the NCSEA AI grant team. And I had been watching some of the webinars that they've been putting on, so I was really interested with it, and I started talking to him, and next thing you know, he's like, you're a really small business. Almost everybody on this grant team has really big businesses, and they come from one perspective. And we're really looking for a small business perspective because most of the people at our webinars are for small and medium-sized businesses. And we wanted to, speak to them like more, and kind of intrigue them and teach them how to do this stuff and make sure that they understand that you don't have to have, huge companies to invest in AI and technology. So that's kind of where that all led and how I got involved in that. And that I think that, AI and process automation is really the future of many fields, but engineering is going to be one of them. And there's kind of this saying now that, will AI replace SEs or structural engineers? And really the answer isn't that question. It's the structural engineers who leverage AI and automation technology will replace structural engineers that don't. Because if you don't, it's just you're going to be kind of left in the dust because it will really make your processes that much more streamlined.
Taking fourth place, Stefan Mikuluk, founder of AI and AEC, shared his perspective on how AI is fundamentally transforming product design, management, and delivery. Let's hear how he believes AI and BIM are reshaping workflows and driving new levels of product efficiency.
Product design, management, and delivery are very like they're different things, of course, and there's a different set of tools and skill sets that you might need to actually do it or like properly. So like the best thing would be if I had a specific, let's say, example that we are working with. But what I think that a lot of people underestimate. So typically when I work with clients, they fall into two groups. Typically, whereas one group is like completely in love with AI, or so much so in love that they think it's one-click solution. Like I just click there and it's all solved for me. It's all automated. It's all good. Whereas the second group falls into like, okay, I'm too skeptical. This is not going to help me. My job is way too complex to even use AI. And I always say that the truth is somewhere in the middle. Nobody's right. The truth is somewhere in the middle because AI is good. It's not good for everything, but it can definitely help. So what I usually suggest where people should start, as you've said in your question, like for people who know they should start with AI, but how to do it, like there's loads of reports that if you know how to use AI for personal productivity only, we're not talking company-wide solutions, platforms, implementation, whatever. We're talking for personal productivity. You can save yourself 12 hours a week. And these are some real benefits. So just imagine going home on Thursday afternoon. You're like, or, Thursday lunch. You're like, okay, I'm going home. See you guys, So,
And I think that's a great place to start. And there is a philosophy on artificial intelligence that, it's this groundbreaking technology that can change organizations almost overnight, which is true or could be done. But that personal productivity is a very easy thing to just pick off the tree and start to use immediately, right?
I agree. And I think that one of the big differences that people need to understand, especially when it comes to our industry, meaning the building industry, AI is not like BIM. Like it's not just a new technology that came in. Because what happened with BIM is that you got specialists for BIM. And everybody else like maybe uses it a little bit, maybe knows how to open Revit and, add some things or view some drawings, whatever, But the specialists are, the BIM manager, BIM coordinators. It's not that. I always tell that AI is like the internet, meaning that it's for everybody and everybody should have the skills to know how to use it. Because even my mom and my grandma, even they Google stuff, even they use the internet, So this is what I try to tell people. It's for everybody, but to know how to use it, requires some training, requires some, let's say, mental shifts, because it's a new medium, in my opinion. It's not like I'm just going to use it as Google. It's going to give you something, but it's not going to be the best at what it's actually made for.
Strong project outcomes need skilled managers and competent leaders. EMI's corporate training delivers expert-led courses in project management and people leadership, plus industry-recognized certification and exclusive premium content to take your team even further. Elevate your team's leadership capabilities today. Visit engineeringmanagementinstitute.org and click on corporate training.
In third place, John Michael Wong, Dave Martin, and Ayush Singhania shared their thoughts on how AI will transform structural engineering over the next decade. Here's what they said about the future of workflows, design decisions, and the evolving role of engineers in an AI-driven world.
Yeah, that's a great question, Nick, about just what the future holds for structural engineering. And I think maybe before talking about what's going to happen over the next 5 to 10 years is really having an understanding of what won't change over the next 5 to 10 years. And structural engineers as a profession, we design structures to resist gravity forces, vertical and horizontal forces due to earthquakes, wind, design structures to resist snow, water, soil, explosions, all kinds of different things, and really put a focus and emphasis on making sure that we provide designs that are safe and resilient to our community. Now, that will not change. The structural engineering profession will still be needed for those things that are essential to our built environment. But what will change, I think, is the way that those projects get delivered. And that is going to be the big shift that will occur over the next 5 to 10 years. I mean, even if we just look at the past 5 to 10 years and the ways that we implement digital model-based workflow in a lot of scenarios where we didn't previously. I mean, I remember when I first started working, I printed a lot of drawings. And now I think most of our workflow is electronic in PDFs. Now, granted, PDFs are still essentially paper. It's kind of the same thing. It's like a flat electronic file. But the way things will be delivered in the future, I think, is going to be the biggest shift. And we kind of outlined what we think is going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years in a document that we call the NCSEA Foundation's AI Strategic Plan. And in that document, we kind of outlined where we think the industry is now and where we think the industry is headed for the future, and a suggestion for structural engineers about what they should be focusing on now. And I think the first part of that strategic plan document, which is available on the NCSEA website, is the thread of learning and strategy. Like, I think that's where we really are right now. I think people are just learning about what AI is and what it can do, and developing strategy around how they think they can take advantage of AI. But once we get over that initial learning and strategy phase, it's going to take some time to develop applications, to leverage AI in our workflow, and then grow and evaluate. And I think it's really over that next horizon, over the next several years, where there's going to be some bigger disruption and transformation across the industry. I think that all of us feel pressure to shorten timelines for construction. And I think there's going to be a need to focus on more highly complicated design work across the country. You think about the cities that we're living in now, and every time there's a new building, every time there's new infrastructure, the city gets that much more complicated. And I think the environment in which we work is a far more complex environment than we were in several decades ago. And so I think that we're going to be facing the greater challenges of the existing built environment, even as we look to the future with new construction. So I think that our contribution as a profession is going to need to actually grow a lot, where we have a larger library of the past that we need to handle. And I think that AI is going to help us with that. And so one of the things that I see in terms of how we as engineers would define value and deliver work and contribute to projects is really to focus more on our core value, which is providing that safe and resilient design. And I kind of think about the way that the AI will work in a very similar way to how other professions have dealt with AI. I know that there was a famous quote from about radiologists working in AI, and it was said that, radiology is going to go away because, computers and AI will be able to read images so much better than a radiologist. And while the radiologist came back and said, no, that's not going to happen, actually, what has happened is that technology in radiology has actually enhanced the field. Now people have new imaging technology, and people are able to focus on patient care instead of focusing on managing diagnostic data. And I think that that's what's going to happen with AI in the design profession for us also, is that AI will allow us to really practice at the top of our license, so to speak, and really focus on where we as professionals can deliver the greatest value, and to allow AI to do what AI is good at, handling data, being able to automate workflows, and allow structural engineers to do what structural engineers are really good at.
That was a really, really excellent summary, John Michael. And I heard three things in particular. So one, the responsibility that falls on the profession doesn't change. Two, our value to society can become even greater, particularly if we're able to expand, the amount of service we can provide. And then three, there is a resource in, the foundation through NCSEA where all structural engineers can come and review your guys in the foundation's train of thought about how AI is going to affect our profession. Runner-up at number 2, Ish Keener, Director of Building Enclosures at Sustainable Building Partners, highlighted how emerging technologies like AI and blockchain are reshaping the future of engineering. Let's hear how he believes these technologies are transforming workflows and bridging the gap between design intent and real-world performance.
Yeah, so just to give you some context on my experience using AI, I started playing with it when ChatGPT first dropped, back in 22, and kind of just been tinkering with it as the years have gone on. But, one thing I really noticed this year is the speed of, the things that it could do, the quality of the responses that I was getting, and some of the quality of the models I could tell was improving. So I was like, constantly thinking how I could use this, just to improve certain aspects of my workflow. But I wanted to pull together some other folks in the company and kind of assemble this kind of AI task force. So that's kind of where I'm at now in our AI journey. We're just tinkering with it, and seeing ways that it's being used in our industry. I think we're still super early, so there's no one tool that I would say like, yeah, go use this, but it's for sure gonna, that whole process from in construction, from design through operations, it's gonna improve every aspect of that process. It's gonna, you've used it, and I hope hopefully a lot of the folks listen to this podcast have used it and kind of understand what I'm talking about in terms of just kind of some of the unlocks in your busy work type stuff. Our goal is to get to a solution, a technical solution that works. And it just, AI I've found to drastically reduce that time that it takes me to do that. And then, other folks in our group. So we have, some other, not just enclosure folks in our group. So, they've been playing with it too, and just trying to come up with things. We've been playing with like Replit, trying to develop our own software, seeing if we could create our own tools maybe that don't exist. But there's a little bit of a challenge there. We've shout out to Sean there at Guild AI. We've met with some AI developers to kind of see what some tools that are out there. But yeah, I think the biggest answer your question, how do you see it helping? I think it's going to take efficiencies and really drive efficiencies and drive that coordination that we're looking for.
And I know the way, like I personally like to approach it is, and there's a difference between individual productivity, which I think is talked about a lot more, and then enterprise productivity, which that's a larger effort, because now you have to start thinking about how do you train an entire workforce and equipping them with the tools. And I think for people like us that are really into this or deep in the weeds, using these tools daily, multiple times a day, it's almost like a hobby, or it's easy. But then there's how do you get the individuals on board that this just isn't really their thing, but it can provide a lot of value to them?
Yeah, there's definitely a pushback, right, to this new tech. Not ageist, but you see a lot of pushback from the older folks in the industry, that I don't want to adopt this tool. What I have found to be most effective is just encourage them just to try it, because I think that's kind of the first hurdle is, folks don't really know where to start, in terms of what it is or what it could do. So, I have a lot of anecdotal stories of folks on my team, that kind of had that mindset, and folks in the industry that I interact with a lot that kind of had that response when I ask them, have you tried any AI yet? And I get that response. It's like, well, let's download the app, let's just give it a try. And then the response is always like, I should have done that sooner. This is really cool. So that's why I appreciate, you getting the word out. And like, that's why I try to spread the gospel there, tech gospel as much as possible, because it is such a powerful tool, and it's going to continue to evolve and, really, really change the way we design and build.
And I think there's always going to be example use cases. So anything text-based is great for an LLM. So in the case of, let's just say, building science, right? So reports, specifications, emails, project meetings, right? Which easier said than done. You actually just have to go out and try it. But I think the enterprise value gets unlocked when you start to understand what your business's specific pain points, bottlenecks, et cetera, are, and then bring in the tools to help solve them. I think you hear a lot about the tools, but less about the strategy. But I think that's up to each individual business to figure out.
Well, yeah, no doubt about it. Each individual business needs to take into consideration all of that. And this stuff is being built right now. Like, there's no one solution right now that any company, I don't think, could just widely adopt. I think every company is a snowflake, and then they're gonna have to kind of figure out what works. And that's a get back to the experimenting. Like, if you're a company out there and you're not experimenting with it, like, it's to your point, it's not just the technical part that you and I do day to day, but it's the marketing and the financials, and how it can help with all the overhead tasks. And
and just in the business, the type of business that we live and work in, even just say 4 hours a week per person would be huge if you could actually eliminate. Now, what you do at that time is a different discussion, but
you just solve the next problem.
Exactly. And in terms of how do you make money as a firm? Well, if you can reduce that 4 hours of time of overhead tasks, that's great. That doesn't net you any more money. But if you can even turn those 4 hours of overhead into 2 more hours of productive work, and then jetting out 2 hours earlier, but I think that's what each firm just has to go figure out for themselves based on how their specific business functions.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to change that dynamic for sure. I mean, we talked about this when we went out for happy hour last time, a few months ago. But not just the overhead stuff that you can reduce the time on, but your and I time that we could traditionally bill for. A 10-hour task is now taking an hour. Mm-hmm. How do you bill that?
Yeah,
it's a value proposition. I mean, so you got to make a really cool deliverable. You got to make a deliverable that the client can digest and make sense.
What if you guys build something in Replit, and let's just say it cuts down on a shop drawing review by 25%, just because I
have so many examples of things like that. Yep.
And you figured it out for yourself. And now you start the discussion of, so how do we make money? What business model do we employ? And then how does AI or other technology change that business model?
Well, I think it's the same business model, because you're still delivering the same thing at the end of the day. It's just a solution to the client.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think it matters how you arrive to that solution. I don't think they care. We're using AI, it's dropping our man hours, but I don't think that means you pay us less for that same amount of value.
Yeah, and I would tend to agree. Now, the pushback from, let's just say, firms that are more traditional in the way they think is, well, if I can't bill for it, I can't have my people spend the time on it. How do I how do I not lose that revenue if all I'm doing is on an hourly structure? And by business model, I meant, well, I mean, for certain agreements, do you just go to lump sum versus an hourly? And how does that change the way you operate your business?
I mean, that's the evolution that's going to happen over the next couple of years that businesses are going to really need to figure out, and it's going to happen quickly. So that, they're going to need to adopt and it's not just about, keeping people busy for a couple hours so you can bill it. That can't be the mindset.
And then from that to recruiting of you as like a young engineer coming out of school, look and say, okay, like I've interviewed at 3 firms. One is like relatively stale, but not super interesting. Another's like your average run of the mill firm, and then another's really like taking initiative to train their people and help them understand what these emerging technologies mean in the context of them being a professional, right? I mean, I don't think rewinding the clock for me a couple of years when I was coming out of school. I mean, if somebody told me I'd have to just sit and make busy work just to be able to bill time, it's
flat, right?
Yeah, it's a terrible proposition.
No doubt about it. People, young folks. I think it's not just young folks, but people understand why they're doing what they're doing. And they know when they're just doing busy work. If they have a solution that they could get to the solution and they know they could get there quicker using X, Y, and Z tool, but their manager won't allow it because for whatever reason, because they need to be billable, they're going to be like, yeah, and get me out of here. This is dumb.
And my first role out of college, I was trying to tinker with software that would ingest drawings in any form that weren't vectorized, essentially, so not DWG files. And the idea was that instead of our drafters tracing, we could just feed it and then get like an 80%, which then the drafters could clean up, saving time. Well, it was shot down by my manager because of exactly that. If we can't bill it, can't make any money on it.
Hate hearing stories like that, but yeah.
And I don't necessarily blame those people because their incentive structure is very different too, because they're incentivized to make the company money today, unless the company is forward thinking enough to say, hey, like we understand what's coming, what's changing, like, and part of that is a change in the way we do business.
Yeah. And I think what I'd like to say to every company is get there as quickly as you can, because it's coming.
And the beautiful part about it is like if you start, and like all of our jobs are run on a lump sum basis, so we just don't bill by the hour, but you can see like on paper like how the things we do from an innovation standpoint make us more efficient and how that ultimately affects the bottom line financially. So
yeah,
but And the theme of just also getting exposure to this industry, because you and I both know it's a great one to be in, but it doesn't get as much attention as it should. And our top episode, Dr. Jigar Desai, Principal and Regional Manager, ECS Limited, shared how combining technical expertise with business strategy shapes the way he leads. Here's his insight on empowering experienced professionals and inspiring the next generation of AEC talent.
Great question. And I like to, again, like I learned this term that, hey, I fit into this category of a T-shape professional profile or a pie shape, which is basically having like a deep expertise in one or two technical areas, and then having a broad kind of understanding of a lot of different aspects at a bigger picture. So I try to kind of see myself as that, or I try to kind of elevate myself to that level. And I had a very linear career, right? I started in a high school taking STEM courses, and then kind of got into science and engineering courses in college. And not because of hey, this was a choice. It was more hey, unless you are an engineer or a doctor, it's a taboo. You're shamed in a way. So I didn't have a choice. I wasn't too smart to be a doctor. So I said, hey, what's the next best thing I could do? No, I'm just kidding. We have so many smart engineers, and so I was like, I liked the engineering side, the being hands-on much more, and so that's why I got into engineering, and then kind of took the path of staying there. The way I kind of have over the years, I've evolved my perspective on you evolve the most and fastest if you have a continuous learning mindset. And by that, what I means is like, be open to have a zigzag career. Like, don't be stuck into one thing. You learn about one aspect, get mastery over it, but be open to jump into something completely different that will challenge your knowledge base, and learn something completely different. For example, like, going from, like, let's say, structures to building envelope, like in your case, Nick, like, they are kind of complementary, but building envelope is a completely new word. How can someone challenge themselves to go from building envelope to a business kind of scenario, or going into some other technical expertise? Having that zigzag path of learning, it makes someone very well rounded. And having that continuous learning mindset is what I kind of lead my team. So my team is multi-generational. I have Gen Zs and millennials and the boomers. I have all of them, the whole gamut. And they all have different aspirations. They all learn differently. And there are stereotypes around all of them, which I have found are not true for the most part. And they learn differently. Their aspirations are along learning. Challenge them, and they will learn, and they're willing to grow. So I the way I lead teams is empower them to kind of come up with ideas, but also come up with solutions. Do your research, do your homework. Tell me why you think it's a problem, and tell me what can be done, and give me something that you show me that you're passionate about it, and empowering them and rewarding them for that. And these pilot projects that I talked about, I use those pilot projects and engage those people, the same people who are passionate about learning, continuous learning, and connecting the two. So there is always that burning kind of light within them, that they're working towards a bigger purpose, not just doing the same assembly line routine thing, because after a while it gets boring. It feels like a cog in a wheel, and like it's assembly line process. So that is the part that I challenge our principals who are in my team, associate principals to entry level staff, associates, to keep thinking outside the box, keep learning, and invest time in learning, and then challenging the existing workflows, the way we are doing business, and come up with ideas that what can be done differently. Just don't say, hey, this doesn't work, this is not useful, but so what now, what's your idea? Tell me more. And I think that kind of helps them grow themselves, and keeps that learning. And plus, like when we do their performance reviews, that is part of their performance reviews too. Okay, what have you done differently this year compared to last year? How have you grown? What new skills have you added? And that is something one of the things we are focusing on is, like, as part of Project Spotlight, we want to highlight the project successes that we have worked on, where we are cross collaborating between service lines, or how are we responsive, but also telling them that how did we do things differently compared to what you have seen before. And it kind of creates the culture of, like, them to think differently and say, hey, we need to do every time, if it's the same question that comes up, that there is a leak in a window, and how will you solve it the same way every time with the same tools and the same process? Fundamentally, it may say the same, but what new things are you using? What new tools are you using to improve your workflow, as well as come up with innovative solutions? And are you staying in touch with the market trends? What are the new products and the tools that are available? Are you utilizing them? So it kind of, we challenge, I lead it as, like, I take it my responsibility to kind of build that culture, and then my office captains and other principals, they kind of enforce that, or they kind of build that culture. And how can we ask them to look outside? And they have to do other things to kind of be relevant. As a consultant, knowledge is our only value that we add. We are not building things, so how can we be relevant? And if you are not relevant, then nobody will pay us.
Well said. And Digger, what I heard there is from bottom to top, if you're an individual contributor, you're just starting out in your career, you can go and still provide value with perhaps new ideas that maybe some of your coworkers aren't thinking about, right? But and I learned this early on, thankfully, from a great mentor, is just don't go rushing in with a problem. Like you said, you have to have some sense of a solution that your boss or your mentor or your manager can help you work through. And then from the top looking down, right, if you're that mentor or boss, like, don't be receptive to what that perhaps less experienced coworker is saying. And I even fall into the trap of, hey, like, we've done it a certain way before, it works just fine, why are we going to change it? And that's coming, someone, I see myself as relatively innovative person, so it's something we just have to be on the lookout for.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all. I learned some of the best things from on the field, from field technicians, and who have taught me a lot that I would not have learned quickly had I not been receptive to them and kept asking them, tell me how you do it, tell me how to do this, and what do you see here, what should I be looking out for? And I think it builds a lot of credibility too. If you go up in your career, and kind of it brings that credibility and trust when you lead those same people sometimes, then if you're fortunate to lead them, then it's great.
As we celebrate this milestone, I want to thank every guest who shared their insights, and you, our listeners, for being part of this growing community. Your support has made the AEC AI and Tech Strategy podcast the go-to space for exploring how technology and AI are transforming our industry. Here's to the next 100 episodes of innovation and inspiration. If you'd like to revisit any of the episodes we featured today, visit aectechpodcast.com, where you'll find full episodes, key takeaways, and additional resources. Until next time, I wish you the best in all of your engineering and technology endeavors.